Hey guys, today's video will be a complete guide on how to set up KovaaKs for CSGO. I will cover how to get your correct sensitivity settings, your FoV settings, your resolution, and I will also show you how you can change the visuals such as your walls and your sky, and how you can customize your UI and your crosshair to get the most clean look possible. I will then show you guys the official CSGO playlist from KovaaKs and give you some tips on how to do each scenario, along with how these scenarios can translate to the game itself. All of this I will be timestamping in the video, so if you just want to see a certain part, you can skip to it by looking in the description. I have been playing KovaaKs for 3 years now since I started my aim training journey. In that time, I have accumulated over 1200 hours in KovaaKs. In that time, I have gotten multiple rank 1s in KovaaKs, and I've also become a Grandmaster Complete in the ValTarget benchmarks, and I'm currently working towards getting Nova Complete. I am also a global elite in CSGO, and I'm immortal in Valorant, so I have a lot of aim training and tactical FPS experience. That's why I hope with my knowledge I can help you guys get better at CSGO through aim training, and that's why I'm happy to say that this video is sponsored by KovaaKs, as I've really loved playing the game and improving my aim for the past few years. First of all, let's get started with how you can convert all your CSGO settings, such as your sensitivity and your FoV and resolution, into KovaaKs. When you first open KovaaKs, it's possible that you get this menu right here, which is the Kovaak 2.0 The Meta Aim Trainer. But for my video and for going through the playlist, we will be using the Sandbox version. So in order to go to the Sandbox, all you have to do is click here. Once you're in the Kovaak Sandbox menu, the first thing we'll be going over is our settings. So you can go to Settings and Main. This is where we will be doing our sensitivity. What you want to do is go to sensitivity scale and select Quake/source, as CSGO works on the source engine. In horizontal sensitivity, you can enter the sensitivity as you have it in CSGO, as it is exactly the same. You can also click on this wheel right here, and you will see that it confirms you're using the right centimeters per 360. For FoV measurements, you also want to select Quake/source, and CSGO's FoV is locked to 90. Now this does not necessarily mean that your FoV is 90 that you're playing on, as CSGO's FoV is based on horizontal degrees on a 4:3 aspect ratio. You don't have to know exactly what this means, but basically if you play native resolution, which is 1920 by 1080, that means your horizontal FoV will actually be closer to 106.26, I believe. But if you're a stretched player on a 4:3 aspect ratio, so for example I play 1280 by 960 on 4:3 stretched, this means your horizontal FoV is actually 90. So depending on what resolution you play, you can just keep your Quake/source FoV to 90, and then in video settings you can change your resolution to the same resolution you use in CSGO. And this way you will have the exact settings as in CSGO. In order to change your crosshair, you have to go to weapons. The only 3 settings that really matter is your image, your color, and your scale. If you like my color, I'll show you these are my color settings. And in crosshair image, you can choose any of these images right here, or click custom and create your own crosshair. In my video settings, I like to have them the same as CSGO or any other game, pretty much full screen, 1920 by 1080, everything on low or off, except for NVIDIA Reflex low latency on enabled. But video settings are personal preference, so you can experiment with this. In visuals, you can change how your sky, your walls, and your floors look. There's a lot of themes you could possibly download from the KovaaKs Discord or the ValTarget Discord. That's up to you. I'll just show you how my walls look. So my cloud cover is clear, my sky color is right here, some sort of blue. Then for my walls, I have concrete poured texture with 75, 75, 75 colors. In advanced, I have my scale on 1, roughness 1, metallic 0, full bright 1. For my floors, I have pure color. My tint on the floors is 45. And I have everything on 1 under my floors. You can change the textures of your floors or walls in this drop-down menu however you want. For enemy colors, I like to have a white body, but you can change this to whatever color you find easiest to look at, and you can have a different head color versus body for certain scenarios where getting headshots is more rewarding. In your interface, you can uncheck a lot of these elements if you don't want to have them in your UI. I personally only have session stats, kill stats, clock, scenario name, my FPS and my challenge timer on. If you do certain movement scenarios, you may want to have your movement bar on, or you may want to have a hotbar that shows your weapon stats if you do a scenario with limited ammo, such as reload scenarios. But you can experiment with this yourself, just uncheck the ones you don't want to see. Now that we have the settings correct in KovaaKs, we can actually start with aim training for CSGO. And the playlist that I have for today is the CSGO playlist by official KovaaKs. So you can find it in the online playlists and CSGO, and you can download a copy to your local playlist, which will then result in it showing up here. And you can add it to your favorites. As you can see, it's right here for me, and this is the playlist. So right now I will be covering each one of the scenarios in the CSGO playlist, how you can best do each scenario, and how these skills from these scenarios translate to an actual in-game situation. The first two scenarios in this playlist are tracking scenarios, and even though you can't really practice tracking in CSGO itself, it is still a very important skill to have for tactical FPS. Tracking aim is generally used when you're already on your target and you want to keep following your target. So you want to both predict and react to the movements of your target. And this can be very important in pistol rounds, for example, as you will be tracking the head of your enemy and you'll want to have multiple shots because sometimes your first shot won't land. You want to keep tracking the head of your enemy. It's a part of aiming that is really hard to actually train in CSGO, since in real scenarios it's hard to practice tracking, as it kind of requires you not to shoot your target because CSGO has such a fast time to kill, especially with headshots. One way to practice this skill in-game as well is to go into a workshop map and to track the head of the bot without shooting it as it's walking to you, and keep doing this with all the bots that are walking towards you. The first tracking scenario is centering 180. It's a smooth tracking scenario, which means that the target is very thin and it generally makes really long, slower movements, so you really have to be smooth with your aim. It will also make random movements to the left and to the right, which is good to practice as your enemies will not be moving predictably either. What's also good in this scenario is that it's only 180 degrees, which is easier for someone with a low sense, as CSGO players generally are. And in CSGO, all you really have to be able to do is a 180, as you won't often be spinning 360s. It's important to just stay really smooth with your aim and follow the target. Try to match the speed of the target as it is the same speed the whole way through. And try not to predict the movement as it is random, but just react to it and adjust your aim and stay as smooth as possible. The second tracking scenario is called consecutive tracking, which is actually a really good scenario. First of all, it's completely on a horizontal line, which is the same way as CSGO is, as you won't have a lot of verticality. And it combines tracking with target switching. So the first part of the tracking, it's almost the same as if someone were to peek you from a door and wide peek you as you're tracking their head or adjusting your crosshair to their head to shoot them. And then the second you kill the target, you switch to the next target and you do the same thing. In order to do this scenario the best way possible, you just track the target as smooth as possible, and the second that you kill the target, you flick to the next and try to stay smooth with your aim. So the tracking part should be smooth and slow, and once you kill it, fast flicks, micro adjustment, and keep tracking. The next few scenarios are static clicking scenarios. Basically, the targets are not moving and you just have to click the dots that are stationary. You may think, why is this good to begin with? My targets in a real game are moving. You kind of have to see it like aimbots. You can warm up your aim that way, you can practice your flicks, you can practice your micro adjustments, and you can generally just warm up your aim. And it helps you a lot with mouse control and getting used to your sensitivity and just the movement in general. The first scenario for static clicking is 1 wall 2 target smallflicks. This is actually a really nice scenario for your micro adjustments, as the targets are very tiny and they spawn in very close proximity. This allows you to quickly flick between the targets in almost 1-2-1-2-1-2 pattern. You have to be very accurate in this scenario, however, because this specific scenario will punish your score if you do miss. So my advice for you in this scenario is to start slow. get a feeling for how the dots are placed and how fast you can comfortably go while staying accurate. And try to go as fast as possible while maintaining at least 95% accuracy. Some people prefer speed over accuracy and some prefer accuracy over speed, but because this scenario punishes missing, I would recommend using this scenario to work on your accuracy and then your speed. Speed will come automatically the more confident you get with your aim either way. The next scenario is horizontal flicks. This is actually a really good scenario for CSGO, as most of the flicks will be on a horizontal level, considering there is not much verticality in CSGO. This works on your larger movement flicks from the left to the right, and sometimes if you have to adjust all the way to the left of the screen and all the way to the right. If you're a low sense player, this will really exercise your arm aiming. I think the best way to do this scenario with the way it spawns is to choose the left or the right and just start left, work your way to the right, and then do a large flick back left and do the same thing over and over, or start the opposite side. But you can also start in the middle and go both left and right. Just make sure you work on both your left side and your right side with your flicks, not just your high score. The fifth scenario is wide wall for targets. These targets are a little bit bigger. They'll also work on your large movement flicks, but not just horizontally, also vertically and diagonally, so it really gets all the ranges of your aim all nice and warmed up and ready for the large movement flicks. In order to do the scenario best, I think you just start at a certain point, you work your way in straight lines, the closest route possible to the next target, and you keep doing this diagonally to get the straightest possible line in your large movement flicks. And your large flicks don't have to be 100% accurate, you just flick as close to the big target as possible, and then you micro adjust onto the target, which will be a little bit easier as these targets are generally bigger. This scenario also doesn't punish you in missing, so if you wish, you can work on your speed in this scenario and try to go as fast as possible. Do however remember, if you go really fast and you lose accuracy, you're gonna get a lower score in general. I always personally recommend always staying above 90 or 95% accuracy and then working on your speed. These last two scenarios really worked on your large movement flicks, which is good in a game like CSGO, as even with perfect crosshair placement, sometimes an enemy will appear from the corner of your screen and you will need to do a large movement flick. This does not have to be pinpoint accurate. As long as you get really close to the target, you can micro adjust, like with a USP or a Desert Eagle, and micro adjust to the head to get a headshot. Or if you're using an AK or an M4, you can hold down your spray, and as long as your large motion flick is really close to the target, the spray will generally get them with good micro adjustments and recoil control. And also as an opper, working on that large movement flick accuracy into the body when someone appears where you didn't expect them is also really rewarding. The next scenario is 5-sphere Hipfire. This is a perfect scenario to work on your speed and micro adjustments. Micro adjustments are really important in CSGO, especially with pistols or trying to tap on long range, as your targets will be moving and strafing and you really need to constantly micro adjust that exact pixel onto their head. In this scenario, you really want to work on your speed. It's also not punished if you miss, but like I said before, you do want to work on your accuracy, because the more you miss, you'll start to stumble and your speed will go down too. So I always recommend, when you're new to a scenario like this or doing it for the first time of the day, to go slow and get used to the movement, and then speed it up to go faster and faster. And just go in a route where you go to the closest target every time. And if you have little clusters of the targets being really close together, you can speed it up, whereas the little larger movements you can take your time with a little bit more. The next scenario is 1 while 6 targets reload. It's a lot like the very popular scenario 1 while 6 targets small, although missing here is not punished in your score. It combines both the larger flick movements and the tiny clusters of targets. So in general, what you want to do is work on your speed, go to the nearest target possible. If there's a cluster of targets close together, go really fast. And for the larger movements, you can take time a bit, and then that way you work on both your micro adjustments and your large flick movements. Obviously, in a real game, your targets are actually moving and not static, So the next few scenarios are dynamic clicking scenarios, which means the targets you have to click are actually making random movements. The next scenario is 1 while 6 targets small movement. It's basically the same as any of the 1 while 6 targets scenarios, except this time the target is moving a tiny bit. So you can use the same strategy as any other of these scenarios. You just have to make sure you're tracking this tiny movement and using your micro adjustments correctly, and make sure you don't flick off too quickly of the target before making sure you actually correctly hit it. It's not punished in this scenario if you miss, so feel free to click a few times, but really try to focus on hitting your target before flicking off and moving to the next one. This is great for games like CSGO and Valorant, especially in pistol rounds, as your targets will be strafing left and right a lot and you have to click them multiple times to actually hit the headshot. The next scenario is Beanclick. In this scenario, if you pay attention, you'll see the closer to the middle you are, the tinier the targets are. They will also be strafing left and right. And the further away from the middle you go, the larger the targets become. So you can really go really fast on the larger targets on the outer edges. You have to be a little bit more precise on the inner edges, but it's really good to practice your micro adjustments and tapping multiple targets at once and switching between these targets. The next scenario is wide wall 6 targets pasu. Pasu scenarios are actually really popular in KovaaKs. They are generally larger targets that make incredibly erratic movements, so it's really good for trying to deal with enemies that make sudden random movements while still tracking the target and clicking at the right time as it goes into your crosshair. In general, with these scenarios, you kind of want to move in the direction that your target is going and clicking at the right time. But sometimes it will suddenly make a jerk movement to the left, so you have to be fast with your micro adjustments and keep following it in that direction. You can best click after it has just made a directional change, as it will stay in that directional change for probably a few more seconds. So in this scenario, missing isn't really punished, so you can really work on trying to click as many targets as possible and getting used to this erratic movement. The next two scenarios are target switching scenarios. If, like me, you are a low sense player and you play on a lower FoV, target switching can actually be a little bit more difficult, as it requires a lot of speed, which is often preferable to have a fast sense with, but it's still good to learn how to target switch. And you can especially think of spray transfers. In a game like CSGO, spray transfers are so important when multiple targets are rushing in, and these two target switching scenarios will really help you with the concept of holding the left mouse button while you're spraying and moving to different targets within that spray. The ValTargetSwitch scenario is kind of the same as horizontal flicks, so you can use the same strategy for that. The only difference is that you have to hold left mouse button the whole time, and if you do miss, your time to kill will go significantly down, so you have to try and be as accurate as possible to kill the targets faster. You can also let go of left mouse button if there's no target in your vicinity and adjust to a target and then keep going from there. BeanTargetSwitch, on the other hand, is exactly the same as Beanclick, except this time, instead of clicking the targets, you're tracking the targets. So it's kind of a similar idea, but it works on two different types of aiming at the same time. The last three scenarios are reactive clicking scenarios. Reactive clicking scenarios are not necessarily very popular in Kovaak's playlist, but I do think they're very important for games like CSGO and Valorant. The first one of these is Valorant vertical flicks. You can flick to the head, which gives you more points, or you can flick to the body, which will give you less points, but is easier. So the best strategy I would have for this is to flick onto the body when the target spawn very vertical upwards or downwards, and to go for the head when they spawn in your close flick range near the crosshair in the middle. This will give you the best score overall. For the Flux Reflex scenario, honestly, just go fast on the targets that spawn close. You can go a little slower on the targets that spawn outwards, as the reaction time needed for this scenario isn't as fast as other scenarios. And just after every shot you do, just make sure you reset your aim to the center. And for the last scenario, reactive clicking hard, just you click on the target once and it will go in a random movement, upwards, downwards, left or right. And you just have to click as fast as possible. So here, speed and accuracy is really important. Just make sure before you click the static dot that you're ready to flick to the other dot. And if you miss it the first try, it's honestly fine. Don't try to chase it. Just go to the next target and keep trying. Reactive clicking scenarios like this are actually very common in games like CSGO. You can think of something like originally before the changes to Dust 2 when you're shooting the door cross, or on Dust 2 if you're in CT spawn with an op looking in the B doors cross. Those are all scenarios where you have to click react fast as possible to get the shot while they're crossing this tiny little angle. Or just in general, if you're holding a super tiny angle, you have to be really fast in your reaction and your flick. Now, what makes aim trainers actually useful and good outside of just practicing in the game, and what won't they help you with? Well, first of all, aim trainers are good because you're practicing a certain part of your aim you want to improve in a completely isolated environment. In CSGO, if you're just playing matchmaking, you may only get a certain amount of gunfights in an hour, whereas in KovaaKs, you are doing a scenario for 60 seconds and you're constantly training that part of your aim. So you can isolate parts of your aim and make them great, so you don't have to worry about that in your game. And you can combine this aim training with in-game aim training, such as deathmatch or workshop maps, to make your aim really complete. Aspects we still have to learn are obviously movement, recoil control, game sense, utility usage, and all that stuff. That is something an aim trainer obviously won't help you with. What I personally recommend is to use KovaaKs for 30 minutes to 1 hour a day. It depends if you're using it just to warm up or to actually aim train, and obviously it also depends on how many hours a day you have to play games. Let's say you only have 2 hours to play the game, you only want to spend 30 minutes in aim training and the rest in practicing your game. Whereas if you're someone that's super hardcore and dedicated, you have 10 hours a day, you want to spend at least 1 hour of aim training KovaaKs. You can do this playlist every time before you play CSGO. So the way that I would do it is just do an hour of KovaaKs, then do an hour of aim training in the game of my choice, and then I actually start to play ranked matchmaking. But it's up to you how you want to do this. This playlist will take you about 30 minutes, so it's a nice in-between and a good way to start practicing your aim, but these scenarios are also good for actual veteran players. And that was it for this video. I think I covered all the important steps you need to know to get started and start aim training in KovaaKs as a CSGO player. If I did leave out something or you just have questions, you can always ask me in the comments and I'll always answer as many questions as I see. And if you want to see me play live, I play KovaaKs on Friday on the official KovaaKs channel at 6 o'clock CET every Friday. And in general, I stream on my own channel, which is linked in the description. And you can always come by and ask me questions live and I'll answer as many as possible. There will also be a link to the Steam store for KovaaKs in my description, so you can see where you can buy the game. And that was it for me for today. So if you want to see more videos like this, tutorials on KovaaKs, CSGO or Valorant, or just gameplay videos in general, subscribe. And if this video was useful for you, please leave a like, it would help me a lot. And I hope everything was useful, and thank you guys for watching.